Setting a goal is one thing. Shooting for the stars in terms of personal goals, I think are important. Top accomplishments in my life are not financial. It's not the business acumen that I developed. It has been the hiring, developing, and training of future leaders. I was born in Hill Rose, Colorado, a town of 123 people, and grew up on a farm. It was an irrigation farm, and we grew a variety of different crops. We had about 100 head of Hereford cattle. I had my own saddle horse. It was an idyllic growing up situation. I was very, very fortunate from being a very young child to have a saddle horse, and his name was Ranger. And Ranger was a giant. And if you're not familiar with how you measure the height of a horse, it's by hands is the term. And Ranger was over 16 hands high, which meant that he was really a giant of a horse. When I was 5 years old, obviously I was very small, and Ranger was like, seemed like he was 10 feet tall. So I'd push Ranger over to this fence in our corral by our house, and he would stand against the fence, and then I would run around climb up on top of the fence and then jump on his back, and we'd take off. And if Ranger wanted to go out and run or ride that day, he would stand still. And if he didn't want to ride, he'd wait till I pushed him against the fence, and I'd run around and climb up on the fence, and he would move away from it, so he'd be too far away to get on. And I remember more than once getting frustrated doing that process about 6 or 7 times before I could get on him. My father, as I said, was a farmer. He lost his father, my grandfather, at the age of 16, and he became the head of the household at 16 years old. So he finished high school, but a higher education was not in the cards for him, and I think his dream for all the 7 kids was that they would finish high school and then go on to college. He wasn't a well-educated man, but he was very smart, and he realized that education was important. And so he always set the standard for us to always try to achieve, do the best we could, and challenge ourselves to do better. So I realized that education was going to be very, very important, and I became the first child on either side of our family to have a college degree. My first grade class was walkable from home, and I really enjoyed the life of living on the farm early on in my lifetime. I ended up with 6 brothers and sisters. And shortly after my 4th year of grade school, my grandfather, my dad's grandfather, my great-grandfather, lost the farm and everything we owned in a poker match. So at the age of, I guess it was 11, we ended up having a farm sale and sold every piece of equipment that we owned, all the livestock that we had, my saddle horse. I had to watch somebody with their horse trailer load Ranger up and drive away with him. That was a very, very difficult time in my life. I never forgot it. When we moved to St. Joseph, Missouri to start a new life and career for my dad. And that was a very, very tough learning experience at a very early point in my childhood, and it kind of prepared me for other things later in my life to accept change and adversity and pick up the pieces and move forward. But that was a very, very challenging start to my life that I'll never obviously forget. I left home when I was 17, never to return full-time. I was in the service at Mather Air Force Base in Sacramento. I was an enlisted airman in the Air Force, and when I went to Vietnam, I was stationed at Tan Son Nhut Air Force Base in Saigon. And I was assigned to a electronic warfare squadron, which is a fancy word for, we flew in C-47. They were called Goonie Birds. It's the old 2-engine planes that had a tail on the back, and it was kind of like Sky King. And we flew about 300 feet off the ground listening for the Viet Cong on the radios that they had stolen from us. And then we called in the B-52 carpet bombing, where we had identified where they were at. It was a very interesting time. I celebrated my 19th, 20th, and 21st birthday in Vietnam. So I was serving in a war before I could legally drink or vote. Probably as interesting was the service in Vietnam and being close to the war was how confused and divided the United States of America was at the time. After spending almost 2 years in Vietnam, I come home and the country was divided. Living in Northern California and going to San Francisco, being in the military wasn't a very enjoyable experience. There was a huge anti-war movement. It wasn't until later in life that anyone ever come up and thanked me for my service. Fighting in Vietnam and being in that war wasn't something that people respected or appreciated, in my opinion. It wasn't until much, much later that people gave the veterans their due. I saw some conflict in Vietnam. I went in the Air Force because I didn't want to go into the Army or Marines, and ended up in the war anyhow. So I didn't escape it. And now, looking back, the time has passed, and it almost seems like someone else's life. It's hard to remember some of the things that transpired there. I'm glad I served. I have huge respect for all the service men and women that are serving now and have served. I can't imagine some of these service people that have served 4 and 5 tours of duty in Afghanistan and Iraq. It's almost beyond belief to me. So we're very fortunate to live in this country and have the freedoms that we enjoy. And when I came back, was discharged and was fortunate enough to have the GI Bill to help me with my education. So with the GI Bill and working full-time, I paid my way through a 4-year degree in business. I'm a fighting hornet. I went to the California State University at Sacramento and did some advanced schooling at the University of Minnesota when I was at the 3M headquarters in St. Paul, Minnesota. My father had a huge influence on my life, and he was not only my father but my hero. He was a lay minister in the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and not only did he work very hard, but he also led the flock, so to speak, at the churches that he was the pastor at. He set a fine example of how to live one's life, be considerate of others, and respect God and country, our family, our friends and neighbors. The second most influential person in my life was the individual that hired me at 3M, Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing. His name was Bob Krause, and I ended up working for him 11 different times in my career. As he got promoted, I got promoted, and he was really a very, very smart businessman, but he also was very good at working with people, not only internally within the 3M Corporation, but also with our distributors that we sold our products through, and also our customers that consumed our products. Bob was a real leader, a former Marine, and never forgot to tell anybody he met that he was a Marine. He was very proud of his service to the country as well. So those were the two influences, great influences in my life, my father and the leader at 3M. I remember my dad saying that if you could count on one hand 5 people that you would consider close friends, you would be fortunate. And I think that I probably got at least 10. My father kept us so busy it was hard to do anything outside the family in many respects. But it was made abundantly clear early on that there was a expectation of not only representing the family but our community and certainly God and our church. I didn't operate in fear of my father, but there was a huge amount of respect because I knew what the consequences were if I let him down, my mother down, my brothers and sisters, and certainly our community at church. So running with the wrong crowd, I can honestly say I was never really tempted to do that because I knew that the consequences would be so severe that I would probably recover. The key to choosing the right friends is having the guidance and the direction and the support of the parents. The parents cannot escape their responsibility of supervising, recommending, and supporting the right choice in friends, because it can really lead you astray. My father said that unless a child knew what right and wrong were by the age of 4, that you probably lost the battle. And so setting friends even at an early age was hugely important and critical from my dad, and it's a trait that both Marilyn, my wife, and I were consistent on, that we supported each other on, and we were very involved in the friends that our children had growing up, and proud to say most of those young children are still their friends today. I met Marilyn shortly after I got to Sacramento in 1967. We got married in October of 1971. Her sister was married to an individual that I went to church with, and I had moved, as I said, from Kansas and Missouri to Sacramento, California in the Air Force, and they became or played the matchmaker. Marilyn's sister thought that I might have some potential for her sister, and they made the introduction. Marilyn is very athletic. We both played slow pitch softball. We both skied. We both played tennis. We swam. So what attracted me to Marilyn was not only her outgoing and positive personality, but was also a love of the outdoors and sports, and it has continued through our entire life. The choice of picking a spouse is more than a physical attraction, although that's probably the first thing that happens, and either a man or a woman is the physical attraction. But the critical part is find someone of equal, if not greater intellect, someone that you can grow with, that has a potential for growth, and someone that is consistent in their life, in their goals, and in their moral fiber. That's saying a lot. That's hard to ferret out. So the dating process and the growing process it takes some time. Marilyn and I dated for almost 7 years before we got married, and it was a tremendous opportunity to get to know each other and each other's families. And so getting to know your future spouse, as I said, it can be one of the greatest rewards in your life, or it could be one of the biggest mistakes you could make in your life. So you want to be sure. When you get married, our philosophy is you get married once, and it's for a long time. You know, after you get done with a business career and that part of your life is over and you're in retirement, you look back and realize how important being a parent and raising your family really is. As a parent, you have to be a parent. And that means, of course, loving and coaching and training and providing the example for your kids. But probably the biggest challenge of being a parent is setting boundaries for your children. And boundaries are simply each ends of the spectrum. And you have to set up an example for your children of what the boundaries are that they have to operate in. Children with no boundaries, it pretty much becomes a formula for a lifelong challenge of problems. Because if there aren't boundaries, there's no guidelines, there's no fundamentals for operating your life. So a system of consequences for doing the right thing and reinforcing that is one thing, but a series of consequences for doing the wrong thing is equally as important. So I'm a huge believer in setting boundaries and guidelines for children. You have to be a parent first, you can't be a friend. The friendship, I think, develops as the children mature. I found my career path by basically realizing that security was very important for me. I grew up, as I said, in a large family. There were 7 children. My parents lived payday to payday. I realized early on in my life that living from payday to payday and struggling for financial security was not something that I wanted to do. So when I chose my career path, it was multifaceted, really. It was finding a job and a career that would provide both the challenges and the opportunity for growth, but it was also finding a career that would provide the financial security so that we didn't have to worry about finances, and we didn't have to worry about living payday to payday. And I realized early on from my experiences and association with other people that sales and marketing would provide the growth opportunities that I wanted. It would provide the opportunities for meeting people and being engaged with people. And thank goodness I made the decision I did, because I found the 3M Corporation. At the time I joined it, it was a $7 billion corporation, and by the time I retired, it was over $30 billion in sales. And I never pursued or wanted to a high level of responsibility at 3M. I never solicited or went after any job or asked for a promotion. But in my career, I ended up having 11 different jobs at 3M Company, and retired at a fairly elevated level within the corporation that allowed me financial freedom. It allowed us to pay for our son's education. It allowed us to buy a home. And probably most importantly, have savings and investments that are going to carry us through in retirement. For my children and grandchildren, you want to find a job that is rewarding and also very challenging. There's nothing worse to be caught in a career path or in a job that doesn't challenge you or doesn't provide the opportunity for growth. You also need to find a job that you get up in the morning looking forward to going to work. There's nothing worse than having a job you don't like and one that doesn't motivate you, because it will lead you to frustration and unhappiness that will probably carry over into your family life. So choosing the right career, choosing a job that you find challenging and fun and interesting is very critical. And oftentimes it's not the first job you have, or maybe the second. I think it takes a while to find a career and a job and more importantly, a company that you find enjoyable. In today's environment, I'm probably the last of the Mohicans in terms of working for one company for my whole career. Today's job environment and companies that you work for, they say you may have 5 or 6 different jobs or work for 6 or 7 different companies in a career. So establishing yourself, finding a job you're comfortable with, but also one that provides the financial stability will give you the happiness that you want. Well, we had the good fortune to be living in Laguna Niguel, California, in Orange County, when both of our boys were relatively young. And as a result, we were surrounded by a vast network, really, of institution, school, higher education. Lance, our oldest son, went to school at Capo here in Mission Viejo, and ended up with a water polo scholarship and went to UC Santa Barbara and got a great education there in business communications. Our youngest son did his undergraduate study at UC Irvine, and just a few weeks ago completed his PhD in pharmacy at UC San Diego. So we're very, very fortunate to have 2 fine young men who are now well on their way in their business careers, and education again provided them the foothold, or the leg up, if you will, to be able to reach their dreams, which they're well on their way on now. I was very security conscious in finding a job and a company that would give me the financial security, but also not have to worry about benefits and retirement. And so as a result of that, I was not the biggest risk taker. I usually tried to assess the situation, realize what the opportunities were, and then move forward. I would encourage young people to be willing to take risk and hopefully have parents and family that would support taking a little more risk than I was willing to take. I'm not looking back regretting anything, but the thing I enjoyed most in my career was working with people outside of 3M who decided to do exactly that. Take the risk, develop their own businesses, and win or lose on their own abilities. And now being retired in La Quinta, you meet a vast array of people who own their own businesses, were very successful. Some went 3 or 4 times building a business, losing it all and starting over. And I have huge respect for those people, willing to bet everything for success, and sometimes there's failure involved, but knowing how to pick yourself up, replicate success and moving forward. So I would encourage risk-taking early on. People that think they can do this on their own, it's a long a learning experience, and it will take longer than having a mentor or someone you can find that you can ask questions with, you can bounce things off of, and get good, solid feedback. There's many people that have been successful without mentors, but I think the opportunity to find someone that you can search out as someone you look up to, that is wise and has experienced life, is really, really important. So finding a mentor, it's easier said than done. I was fortunate in my life. My first mentor was my father, and the second one was the man that hired me. So I lucked out. Well, as I indicated earlier, my folks were not very knowledgeable about money. My mom basically ran the family budget. I remember when I was a sophomore, a junior in high school, I had a part-time job after school, and that salary bought groceries from time to time. I helped make the mortgage payment. At the time, I was very resentful of having to work and my money being used to support the family. And there was a while where I was disappointed in my dad because he couldn't financially support the family properly. So my mom and dad really never figured out how to multiply their earnings, they never had money really to invest. So that's where my insecurity or the need for security and a special financial security came from. So I was fortunate to work for a gentleman in Sacramento during college, and then worked for him for 2 years after college. That was an entrepreneur, started his own business, was very, very savvy with money. And he helped educate me a lot on the power of compounding and interest and investing on a regular basis. So unfortunately, I did not get much advice or help from my mother or father in terms of how to accumulate or invest money. That was something I had to learn on my own. Finding a financial advisor was confusing, and also a situation of I was looking for someone that I had 100% confidence in and trust. And when you're talking about working for 30 plus years, accumulating your wealth and your investments, establishing a relationship with somebody that you barely knew to give them all your money to invest is a very scary thing to think about. This past few years that we've gone through these financial crises even compounded the insecurities of keeping and hanging on to your money. I first of all went to a financial planner and investment counselor that had an affiliation with 3M in St. Paul, Minnesota. And I traveled to St. Paul, Minnesota frequently, so I was able to see him and follow up with him. But I really felt the need to find someone locally in California, specifically in Orange County, that I could work with and trust, that was knowledgeable not only about typical equities investing, but also in unusual or unique opportunities for investing. And it was actually through my affiliation at a country club that we belong to that I found our current investment advisor. who's also a good friend and someone that I trust implicitly with my financial future, our family's financial future, and hopefully my son's future investing opportunities. And feel very, very fortunate that I found Simon Reeves and Tide Rock Financial. The thing that's most important about money in accumulating wealth is it gives you the financial security and not having to worry about the future. That was what my objective was when I first got out of college, was to establish a life and have the financial freedom where I didn't have to worry about where the next dollar was coming from. It's also was a desire of mine to invest so that we could generate some generational wealth. In other words, not only taking care of Marilyn and myself financial needs, but also establishing investment tool that would provide for my sons and their wives and hopefully our grandchildren in the future. So spending money wisely, saving wisely, investing wisely, so that money becomes a tool to help you rather than money controlling your life and being obsessed with having money. It really is wanting money to be a tool that supports your life. If I was given $1 million today and I had the ability to do anything I wanted with that $1 million, I would take a third of it and start a college fund for my grandchildren and probably additional college scholarships, if you will, with that third of that $1 million. The second third of that, I would work with an organization that I've become friends with and involved with called Kiva, K-I-V-A. And this is a charitable organization that makes microloans to people all over the world. And it's surprising how little you need to spend to make a huge difference in people's lives. $25 or a $50 loan that is repaid by these same people that borrow the money and goes back into the fund is just an unbelievable organization around the world. And then the last third of that money, I think that we need to do a lot more charitable work in local communities and charities within areas that we live. I think we could make a huge difference and not depend on the government, but we can do a lot on ourselves to help those less fortunate with us. I think one of the things that we tend to forget about is the giving of our personal time and effort to help those around us. There's such a huge reward in helping those around you with your time and your talent and being a mentor to those. And as I've found over the years, giving of your own time, the rewards that come back to you and the thanks that you get is so much more than you could ever give. It comes back 1,000 times more to you. The ideal vacation for me and my family, I couldn't do it by myself, would be a weekend at Pebble Beach with my wife, my two sons, and their wives. Now, we have our own foursome. There'd be my two sons, my wife, and myself, and our two daughter-in-laws would be at the spa. But an ideal weekend would be on the coast in Northern California at Pebble Beach. Well, I'm a committed golfer, and that certainly is my favorite pastime and hobby. We do like to travel. We've been fortunate to go to Europe on a couple different occasions. We also had the opportunity to go to Brazil and spend about 2.5 weeks in Brazil. I would like to go to Asia, and the traveling is probably the biggest thing in terms of an extracurricular additional hobby. I have a pretty wide range of music. I don't have any specific that I really love more than another. The advent of the iPad, the iPod, and iTunes has been an amazing both learning experience and also a hugely enjoyable to be able to take your music with you and virtually listen to it everywhere. So I feel very fortunate to live in this day and age with all the tools that make music portable and virtually unlimited in what you can listen to. You know, when you think about professional goals, it's usually in your work life, and I guess as you reach this point in your career when you're retired, you never stop looking forward. And so, my personal goals now is to be the best, continue to be the best father and husband I can be. Hopefully, someday we'll have grandchildren, so I can be a good grandfather. But my personal goals right now are probably community service. And I've become fairly involved in the city of La Quinta. I'm a member of Concerned Citizens of La Quinta and help people that don't have a voice, both with the city and the county and the state. And at some point, potentially, possibly run for city council in La Quinta. Setting a goal is one thing. Shooting for the stars in terms of personal goals, I think are important. And again, it's not just financial. It's helping those around you, helping others succeed is a huge reward. As I said, my father was a lay minister in a church, and obviously all seven of the children grew up in that environment. So our lives were hugely shaped by religion and the example that my father and my mother set for us. I know of no finer people than my mom or dad, and a big part of that was religion. So I think spirituality, whether you're part of an organized religion, the belief in God and a life hereafter are very, very important to me. And that's what I wanted to instill in my personal life, in my family, and those that search out and are looking for guidance. I think a belief in God and a higher being is very, very important in people's lives. My oldest son, Lance, married a Roman Catholic, and he converted to that religion. My youngest son is marrying a Buddhist. I'm not sure if he'll be a converted Buddhist or practicing Buddhist, but I think a huge diversity of religion is very helpful. And then letting the individual or the children make their decision. I don't think religion should be forced by the parents on a young person. I think that's something that they need to become comfortable with, grow into, and have a personal commitment to God in their own life. Well, as I said earlier, helping those that are either don't have the ability or the confidence or understanding of how a community government or community services work is very, very important for someone like myself that has a little bit of understanding and a network of friends to help those kind of maneuver through the maze of services available and what the community can do for them. I think it's one of the things that we've lost in this country is the charitable aspect of helping others around you. So I want to be the example to try to help and give more. Top accomplishments in my life are not financial. It's not the business acumen that I developed. It has been the hiring, developing, and training of future leaders. There's nothing more rewarding than seeing people with talent, with the ability to grow, and really rise way, way above what they thought was possible. I think that it's probably be three things: the family, the business, and then your fellow man. And trying to make each one of those things better is a huge, it's a big goal, and it's really shooting for the stars. Be a little more tolerant, be a little more understanding, be a little more accepting of others' views, even if they don't blend with yours. And we need to be a little more respectful of each other, a little more tolerant, and a little more loving to make the world a better place. I guess the thing that I would like people to remember me when I'm gone is that he was an honest person, a fair person, and a good man, and try to make those around him better. If you've done that, I think you've lived a full life and made a contribution to mankind.